Hello all. Today our topic for discussion is the short story The Little Match Girl. The author of this story is Hans Christian Andersen. Hans Christian Andersen was a poet and author from Denmark. He lived during the Victorian times. He was born to poor parents and he fought the rigid class structure of his times throughout his life. It was during and before the Victorian times that Industrial Revolution took place. During Industrial Revolution, there was a mass migration of people from the rural to the urban areas. People from the villages came to the cities to work in factories, and the cities were overcrowded. The living conditions were extremely unhygienic, and the class discrimination between the rich and the poor was clearer than ever. This was also the time when child labor became very strong in the Victorian society. Hans Christian Andersen may be called a master in the fairy tale genre. Why do we call him this? Because he uses the fairy tale construct to create a beautiful picture. But underlying this picture, he breaks down the construct of a fairy tale to show us the harsh reality, to show us the picture of bitter truth. One of the examples is this very story, The Little Match Girl, where the beautiful poor girl dies in the end. Some other examples are The Little Mermaid, where the mermaid is betrayed by her prince. The Fir Tree, where the fir tree lies discarded after Christmas, sighing over past glories. So, by now, I think you have guessed that this story that we are going to study today, it does not have a happy ending. I have put in the pictures of the text of this story in this video as well. We come to the setting of the story. The setting of a story or poem or any piece of literature is based on the time and place on which the piece of literature has been set. The time setting of this story is New Year's Eve, which means it is the end of the old year. People are celebrating with their friends and family. They are safe and happy within the warmth of their homes. There is the mention of darkness gathering, which shows that it is evening and night is approaching. Night or darkness is also symbolic of something bad that might happen. Of course, it is the 31st December, so in any European country, it will be extremely cold, and we also have the mention of snowfall. The place setting of this story is on the streets. The little girl, she is out on the streets on this cold evening to earn some money in order to give it to her father. She is extremely poor. She does not have any shelter. And when we find her huddled down in a corner, we understand that she is completely helpless and her back is against the wall. This beautiful girl has been described so vividly that we get a clear picture of her with the words used by the author. She is poor. She does not have anything to cover her head with. She is bareheaded and barefoot. She did not have her own slippers. She was wearing her mother's slippers, which were too big for her, and she had lost them as well. Now, her feet were red and blue with the cold. She had beautiful curled and long golden hair, and snowflakes fell on her bare head. But as we have already seen, she is bareheaded. She does not have anything to cover her head with. She is shivering and she is hungry, and all that she has is an old apron over her dress and some matchsticks in the pocket of that old torn apron. She is out on this cold evening to sell matchsticks, but her thin hands were almost numb with cold. She was afraid to go back home because she was unable to earn a single penny throughout the day, and she knew that if she went back home empty-handed, her father would surely beat her. But she didn't want to go back home as well, because her home was in such a deplorable condition that there was no safety, there was no warmth. Her home was not a shelter for her anymore. There was nobody to love her, and it was cold. Now, this girl, she finally dares to strike the first matchstick. As she will strike one matchstick after the other, she will be hallucinating or imagining various visions. All these visions are symbolic of the things that she lacks in her real life. As she strikes the first matchstick, she hallucinates a great iron stove with polished brass knobs and brass ornaments. This stove burnt so beautifully and gave out such a lovely warmth that all the coldness that the girl felt till now vanished within a moment. But this was very temporary, because as soon as the matchstick burnt out, everything vanished and she was back into the darkness of the night. This first vision is symbolic of the warmth that she lacked on that cold night, which is why she imagines something to give her warmth, that is, the great iron stove. After the first matchstick burns out, she takes out the second one and she strikes it against the wall. And this time, the second matchstick burns beautifully. And the wall in front of her, as if, becomes transparent. And on the other side of the wall, she hallucinates a shining white cloth spread on the table and beautiful china dinnerware laid out on it. She was extremely hungry, and she imagines there is a roast goose stuffed with prunes and apples steaming deliciously. The goose hopped down from the dish, waddled across the floor with carving knife and fork in its back, waddled straight up to the poor child. Now we need to remember that all of these things are just the imagination of the girl. She was so hungry that she imagined food. She was famished, and the moment she struck the second matchstick, she imagined all these beautiful food items. And it is her active imagination which shows her that a goose that has been roasted already can jump down the table and come towards her. This matchstick burns out as well. The third matchstick that she burns gives her the vision of the most beautiful Christmas tree. This Christmas tree was much larger and much lovelier than the one she had seen the previous year in a rich merchant's house. But from outside, she did not enter the merchant's house. The 1,000 candles that she imagined on this Christmas tree, the beautiful balls of various colors on this Christmas tree, they all rose higher and higher and turned into bright stars in the sky. One of them fell, streaking the sky with light. This third vision is symbolic of the celebrations and festivity that the little girl lacked in her life. She was lonely, she was alone on the streets, and she wanted something to cheer her up. This is where we need to assume that probably where the girl imagines that a star falls from the sky, it is the first hint that the author gives us that the girl is on the verge of her death. This is because the girl had been once told by her grandmother that when a star falls from the sky, a soul goes up to heaven. After this, the little match girl, she strikes the fourth matchstick. And this time, she imagines her old grandmother. Her grandmother was now dead, and her grandmother was the only person who actually loved her. She had nobody to love her anymore, and this vision is symbolic of the love that she lacked in her life. Her grandmother appeared to be so bright and shining and looking so gentle, kind and loving. This kindness, this love is what she lacked in her life. But as soon as the fourth matchstick burnt out, she knew that her grandmother will not return to her. So, in her desperation, she burnt a bunch of matchsticks. She quickly struck all the rest of the matches because she wanted to keep her grandmother with her. This time, it was brighter than broad daylight, and her grandmother appeared in front of her. She looked so beautiful. This time, the girl requested her grandmother to take her away because she knew that if the matchsticks burnt out, then her grandmother will vanish as well, like the stove, the food, the Christmas tree, like all the other things, and she did not want to lose her. So this time, in her vision, she saw that her grandmother is taking her away towards glory and joy, and they finally were both with God. Probably this is the moment where the little match girl actually dies. This vision, the final vision, is symbolic of the desperation to escape her painful life and, of course, her death. In the final vision, as the grandmother appears and takes the girl with her to heaven, the girl finally escapes. She finally finds her ending. It may not be a happy ending in the true sense, in the sense of reality, but for this little girl, this ending was probably the happiest that she could ever get in her life. The next morning is the first day of the new year, and we see that in that cold dawn, the little girl is frozen to death. She is still holding the matches in her hand, and as the people on the roads, they see this dead body, this corpse of the little girl, she is just another poor girl dead on the streets. It is their apathy, their indifference that makes them come to the inference that she was only trying to warm herself. The people, they are unaware of the beautiful things that the little girl could imagine, even though she was poor, but her imagination was rich, much richer than the rich people in the warm homes. This is not a happy ending, obviously, but for the little girl, this was the happiest part of her life because she could finally be in heaven with her grandmother. As we come to the concepts or the themes discussed in the story, the few things we need to remember are that it is the class discrimination that is so obvious in the story. Also the child labor and how the problems of child labor take away the lives of these little innocent children. Towards the end of the story, we also come across the apathy of the common people who are completely indifferent to the problems of the poor people. But in spite of all of these things, it is the power of imagination of children that comes across to us in the brightest way. In spite of all the hardships of the little girl, the beautiful things that she imagined, the roast goose, the iron stove with its beautiful designs, the magnificent Christmas tree, and even her grandmother, these are the things that can never be taken away from even a poor child by the rich society. Here we need to remember one more thing, that the little girl has not been given any name. This has been done to give this story a universal appeal, so that this girl is a representative of all the poor children who die and who suffer due to child labor in this world. This story is not a happy one, of course, but if we read this story and if we try to understand the themes and the emotions in this story, we can enjoy it and we can become richer in our own imagination and emotions, and we can enjoy studying and reading literature as well.